been probably about a week and a half since I've done a Substack live, so I'm going to try do a few more. I'm assuming most of the people here are from America. I thought I'd start. Hi, Paul. How you going? I thought I'd start today's Substack talking about. Hi, Sandra. Good to see you again, Sandra. Hi, Natalie. How you going? Good to see you. All the way from Australia. It's 11:07 a.m. in Australia. So I'm assuming for most of the people watching on my Substack live, hey Sandra, I'm assuming most of the people it's probably nighttime over there in the United States. Probably what 10, 11, 12, I guess, depending on which part of America you're listening from. So yeah, so morning here. I've just had my coffee, everything, my breakfast, 8 p.m., Sandra. Oh, wow. So that's, yeah, okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So it's not too late. It's not, that's pretty good time, isn't it? Um, so thank you for joining 9 p.m. in DC. Oh, thanks, Karen. Oh, that's interesting. 9 p.m., 8 p.m. Okay. Yeah. Yep. And I think great to join you down in the lounge down under. Thanks, Paul. Thank you. 9 p.m. in Virginia. Okay, that's interesting. And I'm guessing that in California, which is all the way the other end, it's probably even earlier, like maybe, I don't know, like 6 o'clock or something, or 7 p.m. I'm not sure. But yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. I'm going to talk about a few different things today, but I thought I'd just start with an Australian thing that happened yesterday. I don't know if you guys I don't know how much news it got in America. I don't think it got massive amount of news, but it did get a little bit. Exactly 6 in California. I thought it was around 6 o'clock. Thanks for the love heart. Yeah, okay, yeah. So there's a big difference, like between six p.m. on the West Coast, and it's like 9:10 on the East Coast. So it's quite a big difference in time. We in Australia geographically, we're about the same. We have because we're quite a big country geographically, not in terms of population. We've only got 27 million people, even though geographically we're about the same size. You guys have like 340 million people, and we have 27 million people. So it's a big difference in population. Although I would say that large parts of the interior of Australia are kind of like desert, so you would have a lot of people living in those areas anyway. But that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I was going to say that yesterday, Anthony Albanese, who's like our prime minister, who's like your president, and I have noticed that Trump in the last 2 weeks, whenever he meets a leader from overseas, even Mark Carney, who's from Canada, he calls them presidents. He always, I don't think he understands the difference between a president and a prime minister. He did it with our prime minister, Anthony Albanese, yesterday when he was in the Oval Office and they were signing off together. You might have seen it on news for an AUKUS deal, which is like a submarine deal that Australia's doing. I think America's also going to buy a lot of the rare earths because we have a lot of rare earths, and China has a bit of a monopoly on that. So Australia's kind of trying to help out America. It's good for Australia as well. And you might have seen during the press conference that Trump, that a reporter, a journalist, and that journalist was Australian. He doesn't know. Trump isn't smarter than a fourth grader. Yeah, he does. He always calls people prime ministers instead of presidents. But yesterday in the Oval Office, you had Trump, you had our Prime Minister Albanese there, and then you had the media, and then opposite Trump and Albanese, our Prime Minister, you had the Australian ambassador to the US, a guy called Kevin Rudd, and Kevin Rudd used to be the Prime Minister of Australia, and now he's become the ambassador, right? And years ago, before Trump was in power this time, but I think after he was in power the last time, Kevin Rudd called Trump the village idiot, which is, I think, a pretty good description of Donald Trump, calling him the village idiot. Trump insulted Kevin Rudd after first ignoring his attendance. Yeah, that's right. So that's right, Karen. So he pretended. So this is the interesting thing that you might, if you actually watch that, and you might have noticed that the person, how it all instigated when Trump said to Kevin Rudd, "I don't like you either," is that an Australian media person asked the question to Trump, and he said to Trump, "How do you feel about the ambassador, who's obviously sitting opposite, saying things about you, mean things about you?" So it was instigated by an Australian reporter bringing up what Kevin Rudd had said, and that reporter. Yeah, go back and watch it. Yeah, that reporter was from a news organisation called Sky News in Australia, which is like your Fox News. It's a conservative news organisation, which, like Fox News, is owned by Rupert Murdoch. As you all know, Rupert Murdoch used to be an Australian. He still talks with an Australian accent, and he owns a lot of news organisations in Australia. And one of those cable news organisations is called Sky News. And after about 8 p.m. at night, it's basically just opinion people who are basically Trump-like people, but Australian version of that. So he asked a question on purpose to create this tension between Trump and the ambassador. He did it on purpose because this guy is just basically like a Fox News type person, like basically a Fox shield. And in a way, he got what he wanted, because I don't think we love Rudd's warning prior to Trump's second presidency. I wish America had listened. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Kevin Rudd in Australia was a controversial figure. You know, he was kind of loved by a lot. He's like he's part of the centre left government, so you don't know, in case you know. But anyway, there's a big history with Kevin Rudd, but he's a centre left guy, the same with the current guy at the moment, Albanese. But a lot of people were wondering, how this started. But I think it's important to put the context in that that reporter was basically a right wing reporter purposely trying to start an argument. Now, the other thing is in Australia, they've been trying to make a big deal that our Prime Minister has not met Trump yet, because, even though Trump has been president for a long time. But the thing is, and they've been trying to make it out like, oh, well, he's not doing a very good job because, Trump won't even meet him. And so the truth of the matter is, I don't think Trump knows much about Australia besides golf. Trump loves golf, and he's also friends with a guy called Greg Norman, who is an Australian golfer from the 80s, and that the 80s is like Trump's favorite time in the world. Like, that's his peak period. Like, greed is good. That's his. So and this particular ex golfer, Greg Norman, he was like the number one golfer for years in the 80s around that time. He now lives in Florida, and they're very close friends. They golf together because obviously Trump loves golf. So sometimes this guy, Greg Norman, will actually act as sort of like a de facto ambassador for Australia because he knows he's got leverage with Trump. So Trump doesn't care much about our Prime Minister. He doesn't care about our ambassador. I don't know whether he knew much about Kevin Rudd or not. I think he probably knew more than he let out to be, because when that reporter asked Trump what he thought about that, he looked around and he said, "Is he here right now acting like he didn't know who Kevin Rudd was, even though he was sitting right opposite him?" I'm assumed that probably were introduced. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know which one it is that Kevin Rudd that Trump doesn't have any idea who he is. Now, generally speaking, you wouldn't believe that, but with Trump, maybe you would believe that. But secondly speaking, I don't think Trump really cares that much about what an ambassador from Australia said. But because he was put on the spot, he looked at Trump and he looked at and he said, "I don't really like you either, and I never will." Um, and so it got the reaction that he wanted, and that was to go back to Australia and go, "Oh, Kevin," because just so you know, the history is this right wing media called Sky News. They particularly hated Kevin Rudd. They really, really hated Kevin Rudd, and the reason for that is because Kevin Rudd used to go after Rupert Murdoch all the time. He called Rupert Murdoch basically con artists and all that. So because he went after Rupert Murdoch so much, Rupert Murdoch, of course, who owns Sky News and Fox News, they really went after Kevin Rudd. So it was all a bit of a scam. It was all a bit of a setup. I thought it was good to create some context for people in America that wasn't just an accident that person asked that question. That person was not some centrist or whatever person. That person was that would be like Sean Hannity showing up and asking a question. That's kind of how partisan that guy was. But anyway, in Australia, overall, it was considered a good performance by Albanese because he got the deal. Trump pretty much said nice things about him. And as far as Kevin Rudd goes, um, Trump saying that about him is probably only going to make him more popular in Australia, not less popular. So that's So anyway, that's that. It's not a big deal in Australia. If anything, it's probably going to make him more popular. I don't think Trump really cares one way or the other. He's more interesting backstory. Thanks. Yeah, yeah. And I think, obviously most people wouldn't know that. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the No Kings protest, which I thought was amazing. I loved. Was that guy with the Coxcom head? Yes, it was. That was the guy. Yeah, 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 Karen. I think that's who you're talking about. I'm not 100% sure, Karen, but there was, yeah. Oh, um, uh, it depends. Are you saying the guy that Trump said he had a good haircut? Not him. It was a different guy. He had glasses. Um, he's kind of like just a normal looking dude, but yeah, it was him. Yeah. If you go back and watch it and you see the video of him, and you look who he is. It's just like the whole thing's just ridiculous. But anyway, go back to the No Kings thing. I basically it was so good to watch from Australia. I was so proud that you had like 7 million people going out. Hi, Linda. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming back. It was so good. Thank you. Oh, the laugh hearts. It was so good to see the No Kings protest do so well. I loved that. I thought it was fantastic. Um, it's amazing, to be honest with you, that with 7 million people, you wouldn't have, right? You wouldn't have any violence at all because I know that the No Kings thing was not going to be violent, but you never know when you have 7 million people, anything can happen, right? Like I was, any other protest. So not the guy Trump came. No, not him, Karen. No, no, not the guy who said no. No, I think that was a different guy. Yeah, this guy's a little bit older. His hair's not as nice as that other guy's. That other guy's hair, like, to go into his hair, and because I did look at his hair, I thought he did have nice hair, but I wouldn't have gone, it's great hair. Anyway, that's not important, but it was okay hair. Um, Actually, I take that back. His hair was kind of nice. And like, for example, my hair, I really want to get a haircut. So, I'm really, it's just that my hairdresser, I thought I'd just bring this up quickly. So I do want to get a haircut, but the problem is my hairdresser is currently on holidays. So I'm kind of in this period where I would love to get a haircut, but I can't. Anyway, it's not important. Hair is important, but yeah, no, it was a different guy. It was a definitely different guy. Um, but yeah, then go back to the No Kings protest. Basically, I thought for sure out of 7 million people, there would have been like one or two incidents, like isolated incidences, because I can't remember a time where a protest with that many people wouldn't have at least one or two things. And it might not even be, hi, Mary, good to see you, fellow Aussies back. And it might not even be that those people who were violent or whatever if it happened would have been like part of the No Kings protest. And so I was just expecting it to happen because there were so many people. There'd be like one or two, and then I was expecting, of course, MAGA to hyper concentrate on that one or two incidences and go, well, the whole thing was violent because that's what they do. But there was no violence at all, right? So it was insane that there was no violence at all because it would have been perfectly okay if there was one or two incidences because you can't have that many people. Proud Boys tried to stir things up in Portland and Florida, but people were trying to diffuse and it worked. Yeah. I didn't know that, see? That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me because they would love, I think they wanted to bait the left. They wanted to bait the left. In Omaha, it's like a giant party. Oh, really? Oh, cool. That sounds fun. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I saw on TV, Sandra, was just like people having fun, you know. And the interesting thing is before the No Kings protest, all I heard was like Mike Johnson, MAGA media, Fox News, all these people were like, talking about, how it was going to be like basically Hamas, terrorists, all these sort of like, terrorist groups, fringe groups, all these illegal aliens, violent illegal aliens. And then afterwards, they pivoted towards it was just old, elderly, white hippies. So, like, they've gone from Antifa terrorists to white old hippies. Oh, and not actually white old rich hippies. So they just added the rich bit. And I was thinking, and then it was basically people, they only went because George Soros was paying these people like money to go to the protests, right? Now, some of these people on Fox News were saying like $500, that's a lot of money. Because if you've got 7 million people, even if you have 5 million people, and you each gave those people $500, first of all, you couldn't keep something like that a secret. Karen, don't try to scare people by putting out a terrorist threat. Oh my God. That's ridiculous. Yeah. But here's the thing, human nature, right? If you get 5 people in a room and you try to get them to keep a secret, there's no way those people keep a secret. So how is it possible that 5 to 7 million people are somehow keeping it on the download that they all got $500? Trust me, if there was that many people, there would be leaks going left, right, and center. There'd be like thousands of stuff. Human beings cannot keep a secret with 5 or 10 people in a room, let alone 5 million. That's just insane. Um, yeah, Republicans kept calling it the hate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wanted to. They were desperate for it to be a violent. That's the scary part. They were salivating. They were hoping there was going to be violence. That's the big thing. My understanding is that the only arrests made were MAGA. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, if if you have these people pivoting like the way they do, they just look like idiots. And the other thing is, if the people that are telling you, like, if I was MAGA, and of course I know MAGA are never going to believe this because, unfortunately, I would like to think differently, but I do think there are some peanut brains in the MAGA movement. And I will say that that if somebody had, if a political party had constantly told me all the time that the protesters were going to be Antifa, terrorists, and Hamas support, pro Hamas supporters, all this. If they told me this all the time, and the MAGA media told me this all the time, and then it turned out to be, and then they turn around and go, actually, it was just old white rich hippies. Like, I would think, you know what, I might I might not take what they say seriously the next time. Because if people are lying to you about that, you got to ask yourself, what else are they lying to you about? You know, I know that they're not going to think like that, but you would have to really think that the pivot that they did from, I mean, think about it. Young, terrorist, Antifa, old, rich, white hippies. Like, you couldn't, like, it's not like a little bit. It's not like they're kind of right next to each other. You know what I mean? And then the contradiction as well is, well, if these people are rich, then why would they care if George Soros is paying them money? Because why would you care about $500 or $500 or a couple of $100? Why would you care about that if you're rich? Because you've got to spend the whole day outside protesting. If you're rich, you wouldn't care about that. So it doesn't even make any sense that if you're saying that rich people are only coming out because they're getting paid, that's the worst demographic that you should be talking about. Rich, you should be saying they were all poor. And that's why they came out, because they needed the $500. I just think they need to workshop this a bit more. Do you know what I mean? Like, they need to come up with better ideas, better strategy, better marketing. But the reason I think is they don't put a lot of thought into what they say is because they know that their base doesn't care what they say. They can be completely inconsistent all the time, and they get away with it because their base. Paul, now phony Christian Johnson's new spin lie is that he was referring to the message, not the people, but the message was very patriotic. So yeah, yeah. It's just constant spinning. Yeah. I mean, you can't, they literally said they were going to be Antifa terrorists, all this sort of stuff. And they would just salivate. I mean, that's the scary part. They really wanted it to be violent, and they didn't get what they wanted. They got the complete opposite what they wanted. They got massive crowds, and then Donald Trump sends out that AI video of him in that plane, in that plane, going over New York, and then he shits, and he just basically shits on all the American people, the protesters, and the Harry Sisson and all that. And I just think, to me, nothing. Like, I know it's a meme and I know it's a joke, but with every joke, there's a bit of truth, and I think the truth. You can see it with all regular people having a great time. The movement will build us up. Our president, yeah, yeah, exactly. Our president said, yeah. And I just think, like, when I saw that video, like, I just thought, on the one hand, it's like, oh my God, this is the president. But I'm past that stage where I think I'm shocked by what Trump does. I think most people are just immune to it now. But I did think to myself, it's kind of like he's shitting on the American people, right? And to me, it wasn't just shitting on protesters. He was also shitting on American. He's talked on MAGA as well, because I thought it kind of encapsulated what he does. Because I really do think that's what he's doing. Because if you actually look at who he's going for the most, like with the healthcare, where the premiums are going to double, the people who are going to suffer the most from the premiums doubling, the healthcare premium, are MAGA people. They're mostly in red states. The people who are suffering economically, one of the most, are soybean farmers in red states. Many of them who were massive Trump supporters, and now, because he did a stupid trade deal he couldn't get a trade deal done with China, so then China doesn't buy the soybeans anymore from the farmers, and so now they have to bail them out, which is, I think it's called socialism. I think they used to call that socialism, but unless it's soybean farmers, then it's okay. It's no longer socialism if it's soybean farmers. And what's even worse and kind of ironic is that China stopped buying soybeans from American farmers, and then started buying those soybeans from Argentinian farmers. And we all know how much Trump loves Argentina, and their leader, who's like this big libertarian dude. And do you remember? That he had the chainsaw and all that. And he was with like Elon Musk, and are talking about cutting the government. He's like this libertarian guy, and they loved him. And Trump loves him. Elon loves him because he cuts things. Now, this guy, who was the guy that MAGA looked up to as as somewhere to go economically for the US, now needs a bailout, and it's a bailout to the tune of 40 billion American dollars. And the Chinese government is now buying soybeans from Argentina. So let me see if I can connect these dots together, right? So Trump pisses off China. They stop buying soybeans, right? Which hurts the MAGA people, because most soybean farmers are actually Trump supporters. So he hurts them. Then he says that Argentina has a great economic model of libertarianism, and that's what we should try to do in America, or Americans should try to do. And then that country goes into so much disarray, it needs a bailout from the US. But that particular country that America is bailing out is actually the country that is selling the soybeans to China. I mean, so I wish I had like the board where I could, when it's conspiracies, like where they do that, like that thing. It's just crazy, like, to me, how, like, and then Trump was asked on the plane how he feels about giving $40 billion to Argentina, while they're actually the ones selling the soybeans to China, and Trump is like bailing them out with $40 billion. And Trump's response to that, to the reporter, is, well, Argentina is in a lot of trouble at the moment. It needs a lot of economic help. The people are all this. And he was very, very concerned about the people in Argentina, or the government in Argentina. Now, I have no problem with the US helping poorer countries. But the problem is he just cherry picks who he wants to help, right? Sandra, they're fighting for their lives. That's right. That's what he said. They're fighting for their lives. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he said they're fighting for lives. Not, but he only ever cares about certain people fighting for their lives. Yeah, Karen. Yeah, I think instead of make America first, it seems to be make Argentina first. Make Argentina great again. MAGA. He's a fucking piece of shit. Sandra. Now they want to buy beef from Argentina, and a Republican congressperson is calling him out. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like ultimately, if America has to bail out the farmers, like that's not a good thing because I from the farmers that I've heard talking, they don't want to bail out. They want to be able to sell what they have to China. They don't want to bail out. They don't want that. So it's the soybean farmers also are against him for that. Now the problem is the way MAGA think, and basically he can do whatever he wants to his people, and they might not be happy about it, but they're not going to become Democrats. That's always the problem, though. They're not going to just suddenly become Democrats. So many times I hear some people complain about MAGA or Trump, but then they always put a caveat on there of, but Trump is still better than Democrats. So you can't really win with these people anyway, even when they complain about it. But it does take a little bit of the enthusiasm away, I think, from what Trump is doing. But I think it's a big problem for Trump economically because as much as I think it's important to have the No Kings March and all that sort of stuff, I don't think Trump being an authoritarian, unfortunately, is what is going to make him lose the election. Natalie, the farmers still vote for Trump and Republican Party. Why? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is this brain rot of, the Democrats are so evil that, and especially in rural areas, that they can't. It doesn't matter what Trump does. In a way, Trump's in a good position because even when people hate him, they won't become Democrats. It's like the Epstein thing. It's like I don't think many of the people who voted for Trump because of Epstein are going to become Democrats. They might not like Trump anymore, or at the very most, they might sit out and not vote at all, which could help the Democrats. But I don't think they're going to become Democrats. I think there's a big part missing here when we see a lot of people, maybe in the Republican Party or, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and all this sort of stuff. But they're not going to become Democrats. So in a way, I'm not sure how much it just takes the enthusiasm away from the Trump administration, which could be good because the turnout might be low. But I don't think they're going to start voting Democrats anytime soon. So I think that's a sort of a bit of a problem for me for what I think that Trump economically is what's going to actually make him lose the election. I really do. I think as much as we would love to believe it's the authoritarian thing, I think what we learned from 2024 is that it wasn't, people still voted for him even though they knew that he was trying to overturn the electoral results. A bailout won't fix the problem. Farmers need to know they have a market to sell it, and the market. Yeah, that's true, Jim. If it's not stolen. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. We don't need to convince MAGA. We need to build enthusiasm. Yeah, I agree, T. You now, when I say MAGA, I don't mean like I do separate Trump people who can't vote or rep Republican and blame Dems. Yeah, I think there's a difference between hardcore base Republicans and people who voted for Trump based on the economy, because there were definitely people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and maybe didn't vote at all, who voted for Trump just based on the inflation. So I think that's who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the full blown MAGA people. I think you can't get them. I don't think you can get them to vote, but you definitely can get the people who voted for Trump just based on the economy to come back, because they didn't vote for Trump because they liked him as a person. They didn't vote for him because they thought, he's a really nice guy or whatever. They voted for him because they fell for the lies that he was going to make inflation better for them. I know lots of people that aren't MAGA that voted for Trump. Yeah, exactly. if you look and Sandra, if you look at the actual polling, um, and the post polling, you will see a lot of the people not a huge percentage that voted for Biden in 2020 came back again because a lot of people were not paying attention to politics in 2024, and they only voted based on the economy, on inflation, and unfortunately, in at the midterms and the next election, it depends on what happens between now and then, but I do believe that it's going to be the economy that gives the Democrats the win and not the authoritarian thing. The authoritarian thing is definitely going to help, but it's not going to bring him across the line because there are so many people in America who think both sides are just as bad as each other. They don't follow politics. You always have to think, like, it's funny how many people, and I think it's a human nature thing, think that other people are following politics as closely as they are, and they're not. There are a lot of people who are in their 20s and 30s, they have full-time jobs, they have young children, all the time they have is to work, right? To look after their children, to do school things for their children after work and stuff like that. And then when they have any free time, the last thing they want to do is think about politics. So they'll watch TikTok videos or do a hobby or go play sports or go to the gym or whatever. So those people, they're not they're not as informed as we are. And so therefore, I often hear people say, well, why did they vote for Trump when he's done this? And that's because they didn't know he did those things. They had no idea. Hi, Paolo, nice to see you. They didn't know he did those things, or they were just listening to things on the peripherals, and that's why they voted for him, not because they knew those things and they voted for him anyway. I think a lot of people just vote on economics. I was shocked to hear supposed conservatives say that they would write in Ronald Reagan, a dead person, rather than vote for Democrat or Trump. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the problem: is that so often, like people, like at the moment, you're hearing people like Joe Rogan and a lot of podcasters who I believe really did help Trump win the election, especially amongst young people. They got the enthusiasm amongst young people out. Is that they will hear? I see it all the time on social media. They will show clips of Joe Rogan and other people in that space criticizing Trump, right? And criticizing him for what he's doing with immigration and what he's doing with the war in Israel, all that sort of stuff. But what they're not showing clips of is Joe Rogan also saying that Democrats would have been worse. So we're getting not the full picture of what these people are doing. Yes, they're criticizing Trump, but a lot of these left-wing social media sites that are sharing clips are only sharing clips of him criticizing Trump, but they're not showing you where he's saying, "But I still would have voted for Trump over Kamala Harris." And that's where echo chambers become an issue. Is that you can start to believe that Joe Rogan, all those people, are now becoming Democrats, but they're not. They're not enthusiastic about Trump. They don't agree with a lot of things he's done. But if he's still saying, "I wouldn't vote for a Democrat," look, it's still a positive, because if he doesn't endorse another Republican, just stays out of it, like, for example, doesn't go for anybody, or the enthusiasm isn't there because he's not endorsing a person, that will definitely help the Democrats. 100%. That will help the Democrats. But not to the same degree as if he was like, how he was with Bernie Sanders. He really liked Bernie Sanders, and he would kind of push people towards Bernie Sanders. Unless someone like Bernie Sanders um, becomes the leader of the Democratic Party, he definitely would not vote for like an establishment type person. But yeah, that's important to say, is that yes, there are people criticizing him. The other person, of course, is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who we've seen come out and really criticize Trump about healthcare, about the premiums going up, about not releasing the Epstein files. Now, I wrote an article about this, about how Trump has normalized craziness, and I stick by it because I know a lot of people on my side of politics were like, "Oh, great, Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying things that we want to hear," and therefore I think a lot of people were praising her. And I think the praise, in my opinion, went too far. Now, let me preface this with saying this. If a Democratic congressman wants to negotiate with Marjorie Taylor Greene about Epstein files or healthcare, I'm 100% on that, because that's the Democrats' job, is to work with whoever's on the other side to get policy. But the amount of left wing media that I heard, like saying, Marjorie Taylor Greene is like this amazing person now, and it was just, for me, it was over the top, and it made me realize that Trump hasn't just normalized lying. Everyone knows that he lies all the time, and people are so, hi Melissa, nice to see you, and people have become so um, uh, you know decentralized. Marjorie's still insane. Broken clocks. Yes, exactly, Paula. Yeah. So basically, you know, the way that I heard the left go up, not all everyone on the left, but the way that I heard the left just like praise Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I just realized then, you know what? We know the other stuff that he does. Trump has normalized lying. We all know about. He's normalized, corruption. He's normalized a whole bunch of things, but he's also normalized craziness. I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to go back to before Trump was president in 2017, when he became president. I want you to think about someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Um, hi, Kimmy. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, like, let's think about who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. She became known because there was a school shooting, and she was a conspiracy theorist that was obsessed with Facebook and called it a false flag. Then she started harassing one of the students from the school shoot. She talked about chemtrails. She talks about autism, vaccines causing autism. And the same day, the same day, the same day that agree, she's still nuts. Thanks, Melissa. Sandra, exactly, just a total nut. Yeah, exactly. And the same day that she was posting stuff about healthcare, and she went on CNN, which is like, everyone was like, oh my God, she's going on CNN. She's sounding like this and that. The same day that she went on CNN and talked about healthcare and the shutdown and all that stuff, she also said, I don't blame Donald Trump. So she's also very careful not to blame Trump. And she says that all the time. But if you watch the clips or you watch people praising her, they leave that bit out, right? And they also leave out the bit where you have that the same day that she was saying that, she was tweeting out that January 6th, so I'm not talking about years ago, the same day went on CNN, she was tweeting out that January 6th was a false flag, and that the reason she knows it was a false flag is because MAGA people are not violent by nature. Therefore, it couldn't have been those people who were beating up police officers, because MAGA just don't do that sort of thing. So, I mean, so I'm listening to that. I'm reading her tweets on the same day. Then she goes on CNN and says reasonable things that I agree with. And people on the left are like, oh my God, she's like totally changed. She's like totally cool now, man. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No. And this is what I mean by Trump has normalized craziness. If we go back 10 years before Trump was around, because remember, Trump normalized conspiracy theories. He used to spread all the QAnon conspiracies, right? He used to do all that stuff. He used to repost conspiracies like QAnon. He got in when RFK Jr. was in the Democratic Party. He was a small player. Most of the time when he was a Democrat, most people never heard of RFK Jr. He was never a cabinet. He was just kind of on the sides. When he joined MAGA, he became a central figure, one of the top figures, the minister, the secretary, basically in charge of medicine, all that sort of stuff. And again, MAGA is normalized conspiracy theories. MAGA normalized craziness. And if we go back 10 years and someone was saying 99% crazy, nutty things, and then on the 1% would say something reasonable, we wouldn't take that person seriously. We'd go, no, sorry. But now everything, all the nuttiness, and it's very clear, yeah, all the nuttiness is now put aside because we're so this weird beef between Marjorie and Laura. Learn more about who Trump likes better makes me scared. And that's the thing, like it's we can now. The reason we can put around all her craziness is because there's been so much craziness for 10 years that we no longer think it's anything that weird. Yeah, and so we can our immunity to conspiracy theories is basically we it used to be. I remember years and years, and look, part of this is obviously social media as well. So it's not just Trump; it's social media. It's a combination of she's been two faced. Yeah, it's a combination of social media, Trump, conspiracy theories. I remember years ago, before social media was a big thing, before Trump was a big thing, MAGA, that you would go out to lunch somewhere or dinner and you would have a group of people, 20 or 30, and there'd be one person who was into conspiracies. And they'd usually go say something and everyone would kind of nod along and go, okay, nobody took that seriously. Now that one person is probably half the country. And I don't just mean America, it's similar in Australia. I don't think it's the same level, but we still have it. Um, Natalie, MTG wants people to think she's sane because she's gearing up to run for governor or senator to build a wider constitution. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, Natalie. I think you're right, Natalie. She's doing this for political purposes. But the fact that she's to some degree getting away with it, I think shows that Trump did normalize it. And I think there was another part of it. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Natalie. People don't realize she always says, "I don't blame Trump." Whenever she criticizes it, I do not blame Trump. You're if you say that, then basically, to me, you basically should not listen to anything she says. I don't think you should listen to anything she says anyway. And again, if people in the Democratic Party want to deal with her, that's a completely different thing. They should deal. They should absolutely, right. The Democratic Party should absolutely negotiate with whoever it is. I don't care if it's the worst person on the planet because that's their job. A Democratic congressman's job is to put if if it takes Marjorie Taylor Greene's vote to bring in better healthcare, absolutely do it. But that's different to the media falling for this and all that sort of stuff. So again, it's just and also the other thing I noticed was Candace Owens was the other one, right? And now I think less people took Candace Owens as seriously as I think Marjorie Taylor Greene got more praise than Candace Owens. But Candace Owens is another one of these crazy people who some people have kind of find a bit of affinity with her, and because of what she says about Israel, and all, because and also but at the moment she's for the last year or so, Candace Owens has been doing some incredible journalism. This is the kind of journalism we haven't seen in a long time. She's absolutely out there going out there doing some insane stuff. So what she's doing, this is Candace Owens journalism, is that she's trying to break a big story at the moment. And she's been doing it for a year. And I don't know, she's probably working 24/7 around the clock on this. She's putting a lot of effort into it. And that story is going to be one of the biggest stories on the planet that will affect everyone on this planet. She wants to know if Emmanuel Macron's wife was born a woman. So, yeah, that's the story that she's focusing on for the last. This is the kind of investigative journalism that we need back in Western society. You know, New York Times, Washington Post, they do not break these type of stories, right? And so she's gone to the point now where Emmanuel Macron's wife, right, this is how ridiculous it is. Emmanuel Macron's wife had to go because they're suing her. Like they're basically suing her, right? Yeah, Macron is suing. Yeah, and they're suing her, but Macron's wife had to go and go to a doctor and prove to an independent doctor that she was born a woman. Like, think about how insane this is. Like, this is like just so crazy that and Candace Owens, has a bigger audience than CNN, MSNBC, probably even Fox News, and she's taken seriously by so many people. It's like this again. Trump has normalized craziness. Then this is where it gets weirder, right? And why for what? Yeah, exactly so. And then what does she do? You know, she then says that Tyler Robinson, who took a shot, who killed Charlie Kirk, right? That Charlie Kirk was killed because he was starting to question Israel. Now, again, this is brainwashed, right? Now, a lot of some, not many people, but some people on the left, because, and this is the reason why I think they jumped onto her conspiracy, kind of like 2025 birthism. Yeah, 100%, Melissa. In fact, I would say, Melissa, it's gotten worse since birtherism. Like, yeah, it's just gotten. I think birtherism now. I think Trump now saying Obama was born in Kenya, I don't think it would get as much news these days because it's just one story out of 100 weird stories. It got a lot of news back then because people were more normal back then and we didn't hear as much craziness. But I think if Trump did that now, Melissa, I don't think it would be a big story. It would go on a story for 24 hours and then we'd forget about it because it would be probably one of the least crazy things he says these days. But going back to Candace Owens, and she says that Tyler Robinson, right? Tyler Robinson, conspiracy theories about turning. Yeah, I'm enjoying the conspiracy. Yeah. And Paolo, this is the thing. I I kind of get the infight, like enjoying the infighting. The infighting, I kind of get. I enjoy the infighting between MAGA, even if I don't believe the infighting. But the 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 thing about Candace Owens saying that the shooter, right? The shooter was, yeah, basically it was Israel that did the Tyler Robinson. I think the reason why some people on the left, and I'm not talking about people who are enjoying the infighting, that's kind of like a good thing. But I think kind of people took a little bit seriously, yeah, they hate each other, is because Democrats, for weeks before she said that, Democrats were being attacked by MAGA for being all MAGA were attacking Democrats, sorry, for being complicit in the murder of Charlie Kirk. Remember, they were saying they. They kept saying they. They weren't saying he was. They were saying they. You know, they suddenly got into pronouns. And they were constantly saying they. So they made all people on the left complicit of Charlie Kirk's murder. So I think when some people on the left heard her say, well, it was actually Israel's fault, they saw that as an out of saying, well, okay, well, this could be good because now it's like Israel being blamed for it and not us. So I kind of get that, but it's not, it still should not be, as long as you're not taking it seriously. If you honestly believe Israel was behind this killing, then you have fallen prey to the craziness that has happened. Yeah, because you want to believe that because it takes pressure off us. You know what I mean? It takes pressure off us from being, from MAGA saying that we're all complicit. So, there's a great, on all my social media accounts. Hi, Donna. Nice to see you again. On all my social media accounts, I have a Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was this great scientist, my favorite all-time scientist, an American scientist, fantastic scientist, who's passed away. And he had this great saying, and it says, it pays to have an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. And the reason I put that on all my social media accounts is because I think since social media and Trump came into power, that is the most relevant saying for the times that we live in, where we, in the old days, and by the way, he said that before Trump, he said that years and years ago, but I think it's very relevant today, where we want to try to have an open mind, which is good to have an open mind, and it's good to question things. I don't disagree with you should question things, but at some stage, if you don't have evidence, or you don't, or all the evidence shows the opposite to what you think, you have to then go, okay, well then I was wrong. There's nothing wrong with asking the questions, but at some stage you have to, accept the reality of something is, and if you don't, then that's where the brains fall out. So I think it's I love that Carl Sagan saying, because I I really do feel it's a good thing for our time where Trump has social media and Trump has absolutely um, fried our brains. I can't believe the things that happens every day on, the people, these massive, and sometimes people go, ignore those people, but these aren't fringe people. They're not, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a fringe person. She's a congressman and she has a massive audience. Uh, Laura Loomer has the ear of Donald Trump and she says crazy things all the time as well. Karen, Jimmy Kimmel was initially fined for pointing out the MAGA jump to conclusion Kriegsmüller was then. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like, you can't, yeah, I get, at least we had a great No Kings Day, 7 million. Yeah, it was fantastic, Donna. I was saying before, I'm not, because I know you just came in, that I thought the No Kings thing was absolutely amazing. And even if there, I said this before, Don, I just could say it quickly, is that even if there had been a tiny bit of violence, it would have been understandable. Not that I agree with it, because 7 million people, there's always going to be some, you know what I mean? But there wasn't any at all, which is just incredible, incredible. And, and as I said before, watching Fox News and Mike Johnson go from it's Antifa, it's pro Hamas supporters to it's old white rich people was pretty hilarious to see. That was pretty funny to watch that evolution of Antifa to boomers, to white rich boomers who apparently got paid. I mean, if you're an old white rich boomer, why would you need George Soros money? Like, why would you want to spend a whole day out for a couple of $100 if you're rich? And they just got to get your story straight, MAGA. To get, I think they can do better than that. I think they can come up with better stories than that. I really do. Um, but yeah, and obviously, like the other thing is there's no such thing as Antifa. Yeah, it doesn't like the whole thing about Antifa is hilarious because there is no organization. We all know this. There's no organization called Antifa. And whenever you speak to MAGA, and when I talk to MAGA on Twitter and stuff, often ask them to let me know who their leaders were, who are the leaders of MAGA, and of course, who the leaders of Antifa. And of course, they can't name the leaders of Antifa because it's not an organization. Yeah. So, generally organizations have a structure, they have leadership, all this sort of stuff. Like if you look at the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, they are proper organizations. They have a leadership structure. They have like offices, buildings, whatever, where people talk to each other. Antifa doesn't have any of that stuff. So again, a lot of this stuff I think is coming from Stephen Miller. A lot of people will say, I've heard about Trump, is there are people who don't like Trump, but they don't think he's going to become a dictator because he's not smart enough to be a dictator. I kind of somewhat agree with that, but but it's not just Trump. He has people like Stephen Miller behind him who's pulling a lot of the strings, who is smart enough probably to become a dictator. I don't know Proud Boys were so organized. Yeah, the Proud Boys had organization, they had leaders, they even had like I don't know what you call it in America, but it was like an accountant, a bookkeeper who was looking after, because they had funds coming in, they had all that sort of stuff. So was the Oath Keepers. So again, these people are real organizations. I think basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to, I think Trump is embarrassed about the 2020 January 6th thing. I think he's, yeah. So I actually do think he's embarrassed. So they're trying to whitewash the history that January 6th never really happened by saying, they're all feds, like this new one where there's like, Miller is scary, he's white. Yeah. The thing, Donna, before I'll just go on to what Donna, yeah, I think, and I think everyone knows this, I think the biggest thing that's really happening in America at the moment is Christian nationalism is really on the rise in America. And Christian nationalism has always been around in America, but it's getting into politics a lot more than it used to be. And I was listening to a guy, and I can't remember his name now. He's from the university in Arkansas, and he's an expert on Christian nationalism. And I listened to a documentary he did the other day, actually a podcast in Australia. He was talking to an Australian journalist, and it was so fascinating that he was saying he's an American, he's never in the history of studying Christian nationalism has he ever seen it this big in his whole life, because generally Christian nationalism in America would be at the bottom, and then but not at the top. And a lot of young people have been indoctrinated into it. Yeah, exactly. And Melissa, one of the things he talked about was Turning Point USA, where he said that a lot of the stuff that Charlie Kirk was pushing, and not just Charlie Kirk, but people inside Turning Point, was basically a form of Christian nationalism. So it's starting at the bottom and then coming all the way up. And then, of course, you have people like Mike Johnson, you have people like Stephen Miller, you have all these people in the Republican Party who are sense white, a Christian nationalist. So I think Christian nationalism is probably the biggest problem that I think I'm seeing in America. And a lot of it is happening from younger people coming upwards and that's why you see a lot of this stuff about, this, and a lot of it happened also with Tucker Carlson. Remember when a lot of the fascination with Russia is because Russia has a type of Christian nationalism, right? And they see Russia as like something. To your point, social media help mainstream and normalize Christian nationalism. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times I find when you look at Turning Point, and my Joyce is crying, Donna. when you look at when you look at Turning Point and you look at all that stuff, is they're very good at not just saying it all out in the open. They will just give certain hints of Christian nationalism. And a lot of how they do it is they will say, things like, you know, eh, they will go against other religions, and they'll specifically talk about other religions. They don't talk a lot about separation of church and state. A lot of the young Republicans before this group used to talk a lot about the separation of church and state. Uh, so now all that it seems to be getting taken out. So the guy that I was listening to was basically saying that all the separation of church and state is basically almost not heard about, whether in the MAGA movement or in the young Republican movement. And that is something they used to talk about a lot more than they talk about now, and they're deliberately not talking about it. I think it's just like a gradual thing, but it does really seem to be taking off. This national and Tucker Carlson, the fascination with Russia and the Orthodox churches over there, where we had Tucker Carlson going over there and, basically doing this propaganda video on Russia. A lot of that has to do with Christian nationalism and things like that, where it's also seen as anti-woke, anti-LGBTQ, all that sort of stuff. And so there's that, or it's like a cultural thing comes together. And I think, it's so weird. Religion is a shield of these people, a cover. Yeah. And it's interesting to me because as an Australian, I've noticed something about America. I think a lot of Australians know this, and you would know this as well. So it's not like a big deal to you guys. But in Australia, a lot of people don't talk about um, God a lot here. It's not mentioned a lot. Like a lot of people keep their religion to themselves in Australia. It's not like a cultural thing. Like it's not like you can't talk about it. It's just that generally people don't. It's like we have a thing called Bible bashers, like Bible bashing, and Bible bashing. I think you probably heard of Bible bashing. Is where don't 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 try and preach to me your religion. That's what we call a Bible bashing. If you believe in that, go right ahead. It's not about you shouldn't believe in that. It's like, don't don't be evangelical about it. You know, Mormons wouldn't do very well in Australia because people would just tell them where to go. If someone knocked on someone's door in Australia and started talking about God, you probably get a mouthful. Do you know what I mean? You probably get someone to tell you off. So and by the way, even if the person you're knocking on their door is religious, like, because we don't have, it used to be like that here. Oh, really? Oh, Sandra, I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. I see. I always thought America was more religious than like Australia or even the UK. because a lot of times I would hear politicians talk about God, or if something bad happened, they would go, "We're praying for God," and all this sort of stuff, Bible bashing, yeah. And they would talk about God, and I'd hear like it didn't matter who, even Barack Obama would talk about God and all this. In Australia, politicians generally don't talk too much about religion. It's in yeah, they some of them will say they're a Catholic or they're a Christian, but they don't talk about it a lot. And if something bad happens to someone, like a tragedy, I notice in America it's like thoughts and prayers. Like religion comes into the part. In Australia, it would be more like, "Oh, we're thinking about you and your family." You know, it's not about, "Oh, I'm praying to you for God." There's a lot less of that in Australia. People don't generally bring up God even in tragedies. It was totally taboo. Oh, let's sec. I need It was totally taboo to talk about religion, politics, money in polite conversation. Heidi, oh, really? I didn't. Natalie, Rachel Maddow unearthed another put together information about America's Christian nationalism. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. Like, I've always thought, maybe because Australia was like found, like we were found. Like a lot of people know this, but we were actually a penal colony. So basically, England brought all its like criminals to Australia. So that's probably why we're not as really, like we don't have this big religion thing because we were founded by criminals. Yeah. Um, but yeah, we do have religion in Australia. Religion is, a lot of people, you see churches everywhere, all different types of churches, and generally a lot of the newer Australians that are coming here, the immigrants who come from other countries, we generally find they're more religious because in Australia we're getting a lot of people coming from India, and they will generally be more religious, or people coming from other countries where they're more religious. So we do have that. But for people who've been here for generations, it's generally not very religious country, Australia. Um, Again, it's not anti-religion, but yeah, God doesn't get evoked a lot here. Um, I, I, I mean, I'm an atheist, so obviously I wouldn't talk about it. But I was brought up a Catholic. My parents were very, very strong Catholics, but they never talked about Catholicism a lot. I went to a Catholic school. I was an altar boy. So I was pretty religious when I was younger. There aren't more religious people here. It's just that the religious people are bullies and force religion to talk. Yeah, yeah, that's probably the case. That's right, Suzanne. Our parish had to close for that reason. Oh, right, Suzanne. Okay, well, Suzanne. Our mainstream religion, sorry, our mainstream religion is the Northeast, and Tom Lowe are having trouble. Oh, right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So maybe I'm getting a bad understanding of um, America being more religious. Maybe it's just that the people who are religious, and also you have 340 million people, so it's a big population. So even if it's not a massive percentage, it still can be seen quite big because obviously, your population's so big. Um, but yeah, just generally speaking, I do find Australia is a little bit less religious, and from that point of view, but it does worry me this sort of separation. That separation of church and state is a bit like that. Australia way makes more sense. America way to seem sincere, middle, yeah, in the south, yeah, yeah. I think Australia, you know, in some degrees, it's definitely not perfect. We have Texas, Arkansas. We have a lot of problems here as well. I think where a lot of John Lennon had it right. Yeah, I think yeah, I think I think what Australia does well is I think Australia does elections well, and I want to talk about this as well. Like I was hearing, I think it's the ex press secretary for the Democratic Party. I think Karine Jean Pierre. Yeah, she's just written a book, and she's been going on all these talk shows that she has left the Democratic Party. And I believe she's left the Democratic Party partly because she didn't like the way that Joe Biden was treated, right? Which is fair enough. She was close to Joe Biden, and I can, appreciate the fact that someone that close to her wouldn't have liked what happened to Joe Biden. Um, I think, and what she talked about is that she's now an independent, and the Democratic Party doesn't. represent who she is, which is fine. Okay. Um, this got me thinking. Now, first of all, I will just say that I think the Democrats did the right thing by helping Joe Biden move aside. And I think, if anything, to be honest, I think the person who got treated the worst was probably Kamala Harris, who had to, who couldn't even, didn't feel like she could even say anything. Like when she was asked that question, she was asked, "Is there anything differently that you would have done to Joe Biden when she was running?" And she said no. And I think she did that because she felt pressure not to throw Joe Biden under the bus. So when I hear Karine Jean-Pierre saying that Joe Biden was treated badly, I absolutely love Joe Biden. I think he was one of the best first presidents of the United States. But at the end of the day, um, you know, I think the decision make was the right decision was for Joe Biden to step aside. And I think if anything, yes, that put her in difficult. Yeah, if anything, it was Kamala Harris who was maybe too kind to Joe Biden that made her even harder to win the election because she didn't want to separate herself from Joe Biden because she didn't want to throw him under the bus. So I don't believe that. I think that part, and obviously because she has a close relationship with it, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But what she's saying in terms of the Democratic Party doesn't represent her anymore, and the fact that because she's saying that they don't represent black women, or she was almost too loyal. I agree, Melissa. Yeah, she was too loyal. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. She was too loyal because you know, and now he's fighting can. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's just an awful thing, like all around, because you don't want to. Yeah, it was a catch 20. Yeah, I think people close to Joe Biden, the reason I don't, if it was anyone else besides Karine Jean Pierre, I would probably be a little bit more critical of her because I kind of feel like what she's saying is the opposite of what happened in terms of, Kamala Harris, you know, she was absolutely not allowed to run her own campaign. I think that's obvious she wasn't allowed to run her own campaign. And if you say, like, just think about this, I can't think of another leader, whether in Australia, the UK, Europe, where when someone, so let me explain this. Mark Carney in Canada took over Justin Trudeau, right? He stepped aside. So what did Mark Carney do? Mark Carney came out and said, I don't agree with what Justin did on this, and that. And boom, he went up. Obviously, Trump helped him by not having a good relationship. So you have to distance yourself to some degree from the person who you're taking over. I'm not saying you have to throw them under the bus, but you do have to distance yourself. Otherwise, people are going to go, "What's the difference?" Yes, I believe the Russian. Yeah. So so again, I think the thing I wanted to talk about here is that the reason people saying that they don't want to be in the Democratic Party because of this or that, right? And then last year in the elections, you had people voting Greens. They were voting Greens because because of Israel. Okay, so in Australia, that would be a little bit different. So what happens in Australia is we have ranked choice voting. We call it preferential voting. So if 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 Corinne Jean Pierre wanted to become like an independent, or she found a movement, let's just say she joined the Greens or another movement on the left, in our system, they could set up their own political party, right, and run in the election. And then, but we have preferences. So you can go in. So this is what happens in Australia. You have the two main parties, which is like your Democratic Party and your Republican Party, and then you have two fringe parties. You have on the far left, you have the Greens. On the far right, you have a party called One Nation, which is like a Trump's type party. They get about 10% each, but there's no chance they're going to win. So even in our system, it's always going to be the top two parties that win, right? So, but what happens is in Australia, if you don't like the centre left government and you want to protest against them, you can vote for the Greens. But you can also put number two, the centre left party, which is the Labor Party. So that way, if the Greens don't win, your vote then gets passed to the person you put second, the party you put second. So the vote doesn't get wasted. So Jean Pierre could join another party in America But because she's closer to the Democrats than she would to MAGA, the people who voted for her, because she probably wouldn't win the election, that vote would still go back to the Democrats, right? So it's not just a protest vote. So I think that's, I don't know if you ever bring that system in, but I do actually think that is a good system to have, because it stops this thing of you separate yourself from the major parties, and then you become like a protest vote, but a protest vote that doesn't go anywhere. I love how Australia does it. I wish I lived there right now. Yeah, yeah. It's very hot here at the moment, Kimmy. Very hot, maybe too hot. Yeah. So it's like 35 degrees. I don't know what that is in yours. What's that? Like 90 degrees, 100 degrees? No, I can't know. Some states and cities have, yeah, they do. Like, yeah, exactly, Melissa. They did rank choice voting, yeah, in New York, yeah. So that's how I sort of was looking at it, because I saw Zoran Mandani in the first one, they have preferential voting. However, in the next round, they won't have preferential voting. So it's only for the first round. So it's only for the primary. So I do think it's a good. I don't know if it's going to happen. I do know Andrew Yang, the ex-Democrat, talks about it all the time. But I really do think it's a way of also stopping people from, like, Donald Trump becoming into power, because Donald Trump couldn't get into power, because what would happen is a lot of those people who voted for, well, he probably still got into power because I think inflation was the number one reason, but it would have made it harder for him, because all those people that voted for the Greens, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So 90 and like 90% humidity. And then, so all those people that voted for the Greens or abstained from voting, they might have decided to vote for someone and then gave their preferences to the Democrats, and they would have got more votes in Pennsylvania and places like that. So that's what I mean by, I think it's good to have preferential voting, because otherwise your vote just gets wasted. And it can also create a coalition on the left or on the right, where you have the Democratic Party, which is like centrist, liberal, some progressives, and then you might have the Greens, which is like that. But in a way, they're working together at the They're working together at the polling booth, because whoever gets in there, whoever gets the party that gets the most votes gets all the preferences from the other groups. Well, the ones that put them number two. So just something to think about. I don't think it's going to happen, but it makes me think that it might not be Trump won because a lot of the people didn't vote. Yeah, but yeah, and that's the thing, Natalie. If a lot of people thought, you know what, I don't like the Democrats and I don't like Trump, but I but I'm more sympathetic to the left than I am to the right, they might have voted for a third party that wasn't the Greens, but was kind of like a little bit more progressive than the Democrats. In my opinion, I think the Democrats the way you win elections is to be a Big Tent party. You have to be a Big Tent party to win elections. You can't win with just progressives, and you can't win with just centrists or establishment, which is why it's always strange to see people attacking Zoran Mandami the way they do, because I think it's counterproductive. Uh, Democrats are still polling lower than Trump. Yeah, I I know what you're saying, but I don't actually think that is, Susan. I don't actually think that's true in a way. Like, I saw a poll the other day that at the midterms, the Democrats were up by seven points at the midterms against Trump. I think a lot of the polling that you see about the Democrats being unpopular is actually a lot of people in the Democratic Party who actually don't feel the Democrats are fighting enough against Trump. So it's not that they wouldn't vote. They wouldn't vote for a Democrat. It's that they're showing their disdain for the current Democratic Party, like Chuck Schumer, all those people. But if it came to an actual vote, they would vote Democrats. So I think I don't think those polling are very accurate, because there's no proper leadership of the Democratic Party yet, right? They don't exist. It's not, nobody thinks of Chuck Schumer or Hakim as the leaders. They just think of, like, they're like the people currently leading, but they don't think of them as that. No one thinks they're going to be the people running at the next election. So they're just caretakers at the moment. They're seen as caretakers. So as soon as the Democrats actually get a proper leader, and then if all the Democrats know, okay, that's the guy who's we're voting for, you watch the Democrat vote go all the way up. Because these aren't people who would rather vote for Trump. They're people like Karine Jean Pierre, right? They're people like her who are going around saying, well, the Democrats aren't fighting Trump enough, and that's what the polling is showing. But they're not preferring Trump. So we need someone like Mandami. Good question, Kimmy. Mandami. But the question about Mandami would be, how would Mandani do in the swing states? I just don't know how he would do. I mean, what's the actual poll question? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But if you look, so another way in America, and everyone would know this, is to look at how a political party is doing without polling, is special elections. When you have special elections, that can give you an understanding about not just what they're saying in the polls, but how they're actually coming out to vote. And so far, all the special elections are showing that the Democrats are overperforming and they're actually doing really well. And when they talk about actual polling, like as I just said before, when you just do a generic, who do you like the Democrats? A lot of people are going to say no because it's just a generic thing. But when you actually say to them, like the recent poll, at the midterms election, so now you're making it about actual election. If you had to vote for Democrats or you had to vote for Republicans, who would you vote? Democrats won by 7%. So I think that's the accurate polling about where the Democrats are. I think the Democrats are up 7%. The problem is, um, is that under Trump, they often get undercounted. Polling Trump is very hard to do because he brings out voters who don't usually vote. And that makes it hard for polling companies to do. So they try to weigh it down, put their thumbs on the scale and make it so make it more favorable towards Trump. And even when they do that, they still sometimes undervalue what his polling is. So again, it depends on what the polling is like leading up to it. But I think they will do well at the midterms. I think the Democrats will do really well. And then obviously at the next election, it will depend who the actual Democratic leader will be. I think Trump will step aside. I think he's too old. I don't think he wants. The other day I was watching him. He was, he had like a press conference, and he was standing up, and he goes, "Oh, so are we just going to stand around, or are we going to sit down?" You could tell he wanted to sit down. Melissa, I think so too, Nicole. Oh, Nicole, Democrats are notoriously self-critical. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we do. We are. I think we are kind of a bit self-critical, but I actually don't think that. I don't think. I think you know. I think that's because Trump is not popular. He's not well. Yeah, I think I think the thing is that we want to be a Big Ten. Like Democrats want to be a Big Ten in Australia. The left-wing party, the centre-left-wing party, always acts like it's a big thing, right? I have deep respect for Dems. It is impossible to do everything perfectly. Yeah, 2028, Natalie. So far, the Democrats' Big Ten has ended up with someone like Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and John Fetterman. Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. But would you rather have Joe Manchin or no Democrat at all? I still think you would rather a Joe Manchin if you couldn't have another Democrat, because as bad as Joe Manchin was, he did vote for some of the big bills like the infrastructure bill, and so he did. So you're still better off, I think, having a Joe Manchin than having a Republican there, because they might, even if it's a couple of things they put through, I still think that's better. No, not Joe. Uh, yeah. What was that? Oh, yeah. So basically, hi Joe, great live. You've got this. Okay, thanks, Natasha. Really appreciate that. Yeah. So I just think that basically that's a bit of a problem for the Democrats going into the next election, is finding out who they want to vote, who they want to get in as their leader, and I think that is really important. I think someone like Mandami, who would do really well in New York, might not come across so well um, in other states. So but it's hard to say whether that would actually happen or not. I would like to see someone who's a really good communicator. So someone like Pete Buttigieg or something like that would be good. Except, of course, whether the very religious, like some of the swing states, would actually agree with a gay person. I don't know about that, but we'll never know. But the other thing I want to talk about as well was George Santos before I go. And the reason I want to talk about George Santos is because we need to vote for the lesser of two evils, and if they're not the best. Yeah, I agree, Masita. You do have to vote for the best of two evil. And I think a lot of people, when they're young, they vote they vote less pragmatically. Like I'm a pragmatist, but I think when I was 21, I was less pragmatic, and I probably, I would have been more, more inclined to go, what, stuff them both. They're both as bad as each other, all that sort of stuff. But as you get older, you kind of realize that life's a little bit more complicated than that, and you have to you have to be a bit more pragmatic about it. So that's why I even think that, a big tent should have people like Zoran Mandami in it, but it could also have someone like Joe Manchin, as long as that Joe Manchin is taking a Republican's place and not someone more to the left on the Democratic side. That's what I mean by a Joe Manchin. Santos should be made to repay the people he defrauded. Yeah, yeah. So the George Santos look, I've always found George Santos is like someone that at some stage Netflix is going to do like a special on. I guarantee next George Santos will get a special on Netflix. I guarantee. You know, he's like this super camp gay New York dude, right? Who's like a massive Trump supporter, right? Massive Trump supporter. Um, and he's just like a ball of contradictions. And then at the same time, he's like makes up all these stories. He's a fantasist who makes up all these stories about being Jewish, being that he was in his parents were in the Holocaust, his grandparents were in the Holocaust. All these, he just makes up all these stories, yesterday, he said I think I put this on my notes. He tweeted out that him and his family are going to leave New York. Are going to leave New York City because if Mandami wins, if Mandami if Mandami wins, because he's worried about crime going up in New York if Mandami wins. And when he said, me and my family are going to leave if Mandami wins, for a while there, I was thinking, is he saying this because he's still pretending to be Jewish? Like, I don't know, like, because the way he kind of worded it was like, because, a lot of people think Mandami is anti-Semitic and all that. And he was like, oh, me and my family are leaving if he wins. And I was like, is he still pretending that he's Jewish? And then he goes on to say, but also like crime and all that sort of stuff is going to get worse. Like the self-awareness from these people is hilarious. Like here you have someone who was convicted of fraud, who basically stole, right? He stole from veterans, like actual Trump supporters. He stole from Trump supporters. He stole from veterans. He stole their money. And now that his community sentence, I didn't know this, but once he commutes his sentence, he owed $350,000. And because of what Trump does, he doesn't have to pay those people back $350,000. So here you have this guy, Santos, tweeting out about that he's worried about crime in New York, why he's actually a criminal, and he was commuted by another criminal, Donald Trump. I mean, the irony, these people are just like beyond parody. You can't. It's hard to make fun of these people because it's the whole thing is just so ridiculous the way they are. George Santos to be so concerned about crime in New York because his sentence is commuted. I heard he has to no. Oh, okay. I actually heard that he doesn't have to repay the $350,000. That's what I heard. I read that like in the New York Times. It's shocking that DT commuted Santos. Santos. Yeah. Now, of course, my husband and Santos look like the type that cost at least 10,000 each. Right. Okay. Um, the other thing is Pam Bondi is going around tweeting out all the time saying no one is above the law. No one is above the law. And then in between that tweeting out no one is above the law, and in between going online and talking to everyone about no one's above the law, then Trump commutes the sentence of someone who had a 7-year sentence, jails, and gets released after 3 months. Like, can we just stop saying that no one is above the law? Except except for them when it's someone who's Trump. Basically, what it is that every time Pam Bondi says no one is above the law, there should be like an asterisk, right? An asterisk that just comes up on the screen, and it just says underneath, unless you're a big supporter of Donald J. Trump. And that's all. I think every news organization, and I think Twitter should automatically apply an asterisk with this, unless you're a Trump supporter. And that would be absolutely 100% true, because he will absolutely, he basically said that. He basically said, like Trump, when he was asked about it, and like, he basically said, when Trump was asked about it, he said, well, all I know is that, is that he likes me a lot and he really thinks I'm really great and he's a big supporter of mine. Like, he doesn't even try to like massage the truth. Like, he's just out there, saying it. And now it was supposed to be, yeah. So again, you can't criticize Zoran Mandani for crime if you're actually criminals yourself. And then, of course, probably Santos would say, yeah, but I wasn't a violent criminal. I was just a white collar criminal. And you know, well, Trump also pardoned January 6 people who beat up police officers. So it's not just white collar criminals that he pardons. He will pardon anybody, even if you beat up a police officer. As long as you believe the 2020 election was stolen, as long as you're a big Trump supporter, there's a good chance, right, that he will actually pardon you, because that's just the way he is. And, again, it's always, when it comes to MAGA, every accusation is a confession. So, yeah, let's get this one here. Great idea. And list each person with their crime. Yeah. Well, I actually saw a list the other day with like a list of all the people that Trump has pardoned. And it was all pretty much like 80% of them were like white collar criminals. He loves white collar criminals. Anybody who's corrupt, anybody who's like, Tom Hummy, anybody like that. He loves those type of criminals. The other day, like I think a week ago, Trump was in Indonesia, and he was speaking to the Indonesian president, and they were chatting, and on a hot mic, they heard the Indonesian president saying to Trump, can you get Eric Trump to call me?" Right. So, and the reason is because Eric Trump is, of course, he's in charge of the Trump organization, and they're building. They are about to make all these buildings in Indonesia. These massive buildings they're about to put into Indonesia, and so there you have Trump talking to the president of Indonesia, and then about tariffs, about trade deals, about all this sort of stuff, right? And then the president says, "Can you get Eric Trump to give me a call?" I mean, he's so corrupt. Could you imagine Joe Biden and Hunter Biden? Like, Could you imagine if Joe Biden was talking to the president of Indonesia, and and then on a hot mic gets, you hear the president say to Joe Biden, "Listen, can you get Hunter to give me a call? I need to speak to Hunter straight away." Absolutely. If that had happened, this would have been news for 24/7 for the next 45 million years. They would still be talking about it now. The time that Joe Biden was asked by the president of Indonesia about if he could have a conversation with Hunter Biden. But Eric is probably bossing around the Indonesian president and other government officials. Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Or they're basically, because Trump is developing a whole bunch of Trump towers over there at the moment. So again, it's like, you know, every accusation is a confession. They would say things about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, even though there is no actual evidence that there was any. They remember this. They investigated Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in under the Republican Congress for almost 2 years and came up with absolute zero. They even did like an impeachment inquiry, and that came up with zero. So there was no evidence that there was any, that Joe Biden was somehow involved in some sort of cooperation with Hunter Biden to do it. And the fact that people lost their minds. But I will say this before I have to go soon. But thank you everyone for joining. The reason I have to go is one, I've got something to do, but also my air conditioning is broke, and it's like about 500 degrees in here. It's really hot today. So sorry if I'm struggling a bit today, but it's just like extremely hot. But yeah, um, so I think America should get rid of pardons before I go. I think the whole pardon thing is crazy. Like, I think, and I'm talking about for both sides, right? Because what's going to happen is Trump is going to now, anybody around Trump right now who might not have done something before, but will do something now, like a lawyer will push the boundaries. Politicians around him will do corrupt things, and he can just say to them, "Don't worry about it. I'll just pardon you." So he's unlimited to how many people he can pardon. So this whole pardon thing is crazy because Trump could basically pardon 300 people around him who are either lawyers, business people, other politicians, and they can do the most corrupt things on his behalf, and they will be totally protected by him. I think this is a crazy thing, or a limited number of pardons. See, I think it should be zero pardons. Like, we don't have pardons in Australia. I don't know about the UK. I don't hear about them very often. I just don't think there should be pardons. I see the reason occasionally for a pardon, but overall, I think you should just get rid of it. You know, and I just think I just think the harm that it does versus the good it does is is not enough. Thank you for the laughter, Joe. Appreciate that so much. Turn that fan on above you. um, yeah, that won't do much. When it's this hot and this humid, the fan doesn't do anything really. It just blows hot air onto me. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining. I'm gonna go have a shower and then head out. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the love hearts. Thank you for the conversations. Thank you for everything. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thanks for everyone for joining me. Oh, hi Nick. Sorry, just joined Nick because I'm about to go. But thank you for joining anyway. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the local Melissa, Susan. Thank you everybody so much. I really do appreciate it. Talk to you all soon. Bye bye. Thanks, guys.